Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. So excited to be with my good friend and colleague, Karl Dakin. I know we come here on a regular basis, but that's really the focus and the intention is to continually build more value, bring more knowledge, and create more interaction and connection. So, with that said, today's word is relevance. It has application to about everything. Specifically, we're always doing it in a frame of funding or generating capital. And with that said, chat's wide open. We depend on chat to be relevant and to bring value, especially quality takeaways. So, Karl, why don't you reintroduce yourself and give our first thoughts on relevance?
Sure. Thanks, Don. I appreciate being on the show this morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Karl Dakin, and I provide services as a coach to help small businesses and communities raise funding. And I'm open to any type of funding, not limited just to cash, any source of funding which meets one of the asset requirements for anyone to move forward their particular organization to make happen their goals and milestones. And so, in that context, relevance is all important because in raising funding, no matter how much we think we are important as we go out to raise funding, the rest of the world doesn't necessarily agree with us. And so we are irrelevant to their goals and milestones as far as they know, and therefore they don't represent necessarily an ally or a collaborator or someone that we might team with in order to get the resources in the door that we need for a particular project. And one of the failings, probably the greatest errors of most people who raise funding, is reaching out to people for funding who think you're irrelevant. So they don't care and they're not going to give you any funding. And every breath you take, every word you pitch to them seeking funding is actually wasting your time, money, and other resources because you should be talking to someone else. So relevance is a big, very important word in being efficient with your time and money in anything you do, but in raising funding, it's hyper important to make sure you're talking to the right person who will have some mutual benefit from working with you and who is willing and capable of providing you with some level of support.
Yeah, that's a great way to start the show. And relevance is something that has to be taken into consideration, not only on who you choose, but how you package, present, and ultimately the success of the funding is critical. So even if you found collaboration and support, it has to be projected in a way that's going to reach a positive outcome. So I see we got some early commenters. Our good friend Omar is here. Good morning, the best hour of Empower. Well, you're making this even better for being here today, Omar. Appreciate all you do. Look forward to collaborating more and more in the future. And I think that's a key element of relevance is finding that tight group of similar minded people who can continue to support each other to have relevance by association and by collaboration. So thank you again, Omar. We've got Kerry here with his first joke. A bank hired a skunk to wrangle into foul loans. Okay, well, that's a little bit of a takeoff on funding. And me and Carl were actually talking last week, Carl and Kerry, and we thought, why don't you just use the joke of the day as the post of the day, and then you get twice as much benefit and you get better reach. So, anyways, just a little tip to Kerry. Hopefully, he can continue to build on his comedy. And with that, I'll swing it back to Carl. How have you gotten better at qualifying interested investors to assure a higher probability of relevance?
Yeah, so I have developed my own approach to raising funding that I call the motivated money method. And motivation being the first and important word in that combination, where if you take the entire population of the world and break it down into groups, there may be some people who will benefit from the success of your organization. If you're bringing a new product or service to market, you're doing something good for your community. And those who will benefit from your success have a desire for you to be successful. They would like for you to succeed because, in their own self interest, they are going to realize these benefits. So, we go through an analysis of who actually benefits from any particular organization. It's bespoke, unique to that particular organization. One coffee shop will have a group of benefits that may be similar to another coffee shop, but if it's located on a particular street corner in a particular community, then it's going to have more benefit to those in the community who walk by or can stop by that coffee shop than one that's in another state. And these are all common sense marketing issues of trying to define who's your best customer, who's going to care the most, who's going to benefit the most. And that's where you want to start focusing whatever you're doing in terms of selling your services or products or in pitching your company. It's just that when you go to raise funding, there are different other groups who may benefit from the overall or macro benefit of your business, who may also be interested in being investors that goes beyond your customer base to the economic development people in your community who want you to hire people and create jobs and contribute to the wealth of the community, the governments who want you to pay taxes to pay for the police and fire protection, a local charity who's looking for another sponsor, for their upcoming event. All these people benefit from the success of any particular business. And if you're benefiting them, they want you to succeed and they will contribute in whatever way they can to your success, which may include writing you a check that you can stick in your bank account.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it brings the thought that the more aligned you are, the more relevant you can become. So it's easier to work with people who are already working in your area, have had experience in your area, are actually aggressively seeking more opportunities in your area than to change people's minds or have them refocus to you, because that's a harder climb. The other element I think that LinkedIn and live streaming can bring is top of mind awareness. People can't see what you're doing until they can see you. And if they see you as a stranger or a new person, you're going to have a harder climb too. If you're always there, always accessible, always in the game, and that could be from going to virtual conferences or physical conferences, it could be making the right connections in anticipation of possibly doing something with somebody. So too many people are into what's good for them instead of what's good for the other people they're searching to collaborate with. There has to be value you bring to all parties involved, not to the final close of a sale or of a financing. But how are you viewed from a thought leadership situation? What have you written? What have you appeared at? Having a background really reinforces your idea, because the question is, yeah, anybody can write a great uh, summary or put together a great plan, but is this the first time for you, or is this something that's a continuous evolution for you? And also, references go a long way. If people don't know you that well, they're going to probably depend on people who do know you better. And what do you have in that regard as far as positive performance? Because people would rather back winners than just back the beginners in a sense. And that has a lot to do with who you talk to. And are you in the same ballpark? And that goes with alignment. Oh, Beverly's here. Our good friend Beverly's here. Beverly's here. The sun shines even brighter. And I'll be with Beverly tomorrow. And if you don't know Beverly, you should, because she is not only relevant and aligned, but a really big proponent of helping others become the best they can be, especially women empowerment over 50 years old. So thank you, Beverly. Counting the minutes till we get together tomorrow without taking time and attention away from the minutes we're spending with Karl. So anyways, thank you for being here today, Beverly. Always appreciate it. So Karl, what has been some of your greatest lessons learned in the area of being relevant and aligned?
The biggest lesson is that one of humility, is the best way to describe it, is I'm not important to everybody. As much as it hurts me on my heart to make that statement, the thing is, I can only help so many people as a coach because I'm one person. So if I'm doing one-on-one consulting where I'm trying to be as you custom in helping them do what they want to do in raising funding, I can maybe help 4 or 6, maybe 8 different companies at a time with any depth. I might be able to mentor another 5, 10, 15 companies with occasional help and assistance. But I can't be there all the time, every day for them at a high level. And that means that to the rest of the world's population, 7 billion, whatever it is, less those 15, 20 different companies, I'm not that relevant to them to a large degree. So part of the reason why I'm working with Don in putting together my own LinkedIn live show, Successful Funding, which is on Tuesdays at 10 o'clock Eastern time, and publishing a daily newsletter is it gives me a chance to take the knowledge I've gathered throughout my career and share it with everybody. So I can be some degree relevant to anyone who's raising funding, who happens to know I exist and who happens to either read my newsletter or watch my LinkedIn live show, which is now getting into the potential thousands of people who are subscribed or watching, viewing it at some time. And that is, I appreciate the ability to be of more value to more people and using LinkedIn as a platform to make myself relevant beyond the handful of people that I can give that higher detail of attention to.
Yeah, that's perfect because, a lot of people you'll reach directly, and a lot of more people you'll reach indirectly or without knowledge of who's watching this show, who will watch this show. And that might trip something in somebody to say, hey, this is a person I want to talk to, and maybe have a Zoom call. And I think that's the beginning. Too many people want to get to the end until without going through the middle. They just want to, hey, do you want to do something, versus cultivating and building those relationships and communication. And the other thing I believe is important is the people you're talking to have to be relevant to you also. If it's not good for each, it's not good for both. And even though if you can qualify for them, do they qualify for you? And I think that's important, because at the end of the day, you want to build better and bigger than you were, not as a trade-off. Like, I'll get money, but now I'll have to make some accommodation or compromise in my plan or in the way I want to do things or who I want to do it with. You don't want anybody forcing something on you, because it just shows your plan doesn't stand up on its own. It means that the other party thinks that, you need more support or something. And, that might be positive again, if it aligns with you, if you relate to it. Someone says, I got a great CFO if you want to get going, and that person is a great CFO for your thing, that's a wonderful opportunity. But if someone says, I got a son-in-law looking for a job, and being CFO of your company would be perfect for them, well, that might not be something that sends comfort waves through you. And I think it's important to have more value, undersell, and over deliver than the opposite. because there's always going to be some wiggle room. You believe you know what other people are thinking or want, but until you have that conversation and interchange, you really don't. And I guess the idea is to stay very fluid, flexible, and open as far as listening, because that shows you're somebody that people can work with over time. If you're always putting a line in the sand saying, here's what you won't do, here's what you can't do, that's not a very encouraging thing, unless that's exactly the way it's going to be. And then you're obligated to share that, because no one can come back and say, hey, you sold them a bill of goods and you didn't perform for them. So it is a lot to do it. And that's where professionals like Karl can come in. You want an intermediary or someone who's on your side to kind of share with you best practices, maybe tweak your presentation in that maybe it's too weak, maybe it's a little too strong, and also be there with you. I remember when I was raising capital, I had an investment banker, Pacific Crest Securities, out in Oregon, who we do road shows, right? We'd put 2, 3 days together. And it was kind of, I learned so much because they were so professional. And I would have just went in there like me instead of like a group who had done a lot of preparation. We always had a financial person there who would be responsible for bringing up numbers on their laptop. Somebody would ask a question and he'd say, okay, let me check that and I'll come up with your number and you guys can keep talking. And the other thing, and I know we're going into a little bit of minutia, is being sure of what you're saying and being able to back it up. Because once you come up with one bad number, even with the best of intention, it starts to put a question mark on future numbers that people are reading. And I think that's where credibility comes in. That's where trust starts to show up. And everything we're talking about, especially when you're talking about funding and money, has a trust element to it and a risk element to it. And to relieve people of some questions that maybe they believe, but finally, when they ask it, they get a satisfactory answer. Or you come back and say, yeah, that's an interesting thing. I think we need to put a little more time and thought into that. And the other thing I learned, you can always get back to somebody with information after you've checked it out. So there's no crime in saying, I don't have that number. And before I give you just a number off the top of my head, let me do a little research. I definitely will get back to you. And it shows you're a little bit more responsible. And I think one more point is taking responsibility and accountability. When someone points something out that definitely is an oversight or a mistake, accept it. Don't fight it, because that shows a little bit more consideration. Well, look who's here, Melissa Houston. I haven't seen you in a while. Melissa's just a wonderful LinkedIn connection. I've been on her show. I hope you're still doing it on Saturdays. And Melissa has just a fabulous story of success from a challenging situation and has overcome it and is helping so many other people overcome it. So, that's the fun thing about LinkedIn. People that you got to know and interact with don't ever leave. They just take a while in coming back, and that works on both sides. So thank you, Melissa. Hope everything is going swimmingly for you. And, Karl, thinking about the future, I know you're okay. Melissa says every week you're happy to post your show in comments with a link. Glad to help everybody, help each other, help together. So, Karl, what has your biggest surprises been when it came to making introductions that you learned from?
That's a hard question because I have too many answers. I have lots of surprises. I find myself often as the intermediary or the go-between between an investor or a funding source and somebody seeking investment. And I'm very careful in this zone because it's regulated by the government. So I have to be careful that I don't position myself in the wrong way. And at the same time, I'm trying to facilitate a new relationship. I'm trying to be a matchmaker. And so, to some degree, it's very easy to just suddenly link two people together and go, hey, intro, I think you two should talk to each other. But if I don't do that correctly, I can be surprised, and everybody in the introduction can be surprised because it may be a terrible match. It may turn out that this one person is really not thoughtful or respectful or willing to do what needs to be done, either on the entrepreneur side or on the funding side. And the consequence is that I've created a train wreck or a small car wreck. Depends on how strong the introduction was, but it causes bad feelings on both sides, and they hold you responsible when all you're trying to do is help them out. So the surprise goes in multiple directions where you thought two people maybe should talk, but at the same time, if you haven't qualified them properly, you haven't done your own due diligence on them and determined that this is a good match, it's a good pairing, you can be held responsible for making a bad introduction, despite your best efforts to help both sides.
Great answer. And Beverly comes back with perfect, Carl. Well said. We only have so much bandwidth. That was applicable to an earlier comment. And then also comes back and praises Carl on your newsletters are terrific. And, I think that's very, very important to have people give you third party validation because you're so busy creating, producing, and developing things like newsletters or live shows. But until someone says it really had significant value, does it have more value for yourself? It's like a comic who can't hear the audience or see the audience. You're definitely working in a vacuum and you're hoping, but when you get a response and a positive response, it's reinforcing and it tends to make you want to focus on what you're doing instead of change what you're doing. Well, this must be a day where everybody decided to show up. Kelly is here. Kelly's always here in spirit, if not physically. And she does a show with me on Thursdays, which has been going on for 20 months or so plus. And a great record of success and value. Kelly is the outreach individual for Wheelchairs for Warriors, has a great show called The Awesome Journey, and is doing so many wonderful things for so many wonderful causes and has so much value and benefit throughout LinkedIn and beyond. And again, there is something to consistency, showing up, learning from others, learning from yourself. And can't thank Kelly enough for being here. And come Thursday, and you'll see me and Kelly in action. So thank you again, Kelly. What happens? I know you've been in situations where you show up for a meeting for some people, and different people may be there. So you were expecting the chief person and all of a sudden something happened and they couldn't make it, or you're dealing with a different group and now maybe your information is a little bit not as relevant, let's say. Has that ever happened to you, Carl?
Actually, I had a situation last week where I was on the phone with a person who I'd met earlier this year. And while I was talking to him, he says, there's somebody I think you ought to know. And then he stops, he goes, oh, they're calling me right now. And immediately bridged the two phone lines together. So I'm now talking to someone I don't know about a topic. I'm not sure what the topic is yet. And so you're kind of in a mental mad scramble of, okay, who is this person? What do they care about? I'm doing my million miles an hour due diligence. Or what are you doing? Well, why are you doing that? Oh, okay. I think I see how I might be of benefit to you. And a lot of times I get into conversations with people I don't know, and they go, what do you do? And I said, first, you tell me what you're doing, and then I'll try to pair something I'm doing to what you're doing, which is to make myself useful, relevant to their conversation instead of me just talking about myself. So yeah, it happens quite often, and more often than you would think, because in today's instant communications, I could suddenly, as I was last week twice, on the phone with people in different parts of the world, where we're being thrown together because, oh, I'm so glad we could get together because we need to get something done by 5 minutes from now, and here we go. And, there's no prep. It's all extemporaneous. It's get going, do something. But communications enable us to do that, and so actually more opportunities come out of that, because if you can, we've talked about LinkedIn. One of the benefits of the shows and newsletters is being constantly present. And constantly present means that you're like 911. If somebody has an emergency, they know where to find you, how to find you, and can engage with you when they need you, instead of going, who was that masked man? Or I don't remember that guy's name, or where is his email address, or whatever. They go, oh, he's probably online right now on LinkedIn on Don's show. I'll just go on Don's show and I'll put in a comment. So it's interesting to see how modern communications keep making the world a smaller place, keep increasing the sense of interactivity. But if you're not available all the time, then you may not be relevant, because they'll reach out for the first person they can find who can solve their problem. They often may reach out to someone they know who may or may not be capable of solving the problem, instead of looking for better knowledge, greater expertise, more specific knowledge about a particular topic. So it's interesting how you want to be available all the time, but you don't want to be available all the time because you can't get any work done. So you kind of have to manage your time, where you may block out hours to do a particular thing and say, yeah, that's fine, but no phone calls coming in. I'm not paying attention to my emails for these 2 hours, 4 hours. Get a block of time done, then open the door to the noise of the world, and then shut the door again.
Yeah, those are wonderful points, and staging makes so much difference, especially with your time. I'm starting to schedule 3 days of posts and newsletters in advance, because once I'm doing one, I'm already there. It's easy to knock them out versus, okay, now I have to find time for an activity, whatever it is, that I could have completed at a different point where I had the time. So some days you have more time and attention than others. That's the time to fill it, as opposed to defer it, and then you're back in the game, and then you have a chance to forget it or rush through it. The other thing, to Carl's point of meeting new people unexpectedly or by intention, is how much do you give them to start with without giving them the whole meal? And if you only have, let's say, 45 minutes, is it going to take you 30 minutes to go through everything you have to talk about, and only leave 15 minutes for questions or interaction? Or could you send somebody enough in advance, especially if it's numbers or whatever that they're looking for, so that they become proficient when the call starts, as opposed to trying to figure it out as you go? The other element to what Karl speaks about is doing some research on the people in advance, right? Look, if 3 people are coming, look at their LinkedIn profiles, look at everything they've been doing. And, everybody likes to know you spend a little time researching. When you ask a question that is totally obvious, if you did a little research, they know you didn't. But if you said, hey, we both went to University of Michigan together, we love those Wolverines, that brings you a little closer to them, because it's getting a little more personal in a good way. Or I saw you wrote this book and I read it and it's great. Well, in a way, you're patronizing them, but in a good way. But it shows that you have an interest beyond just your interest. And anything you do for yourself is something that people can relate to what you're going to do for us or for other people. So if you've got a lot of positive experience, a lot of great people, and actually if you offer references in advance, if you know their quality and relevant, and say, please, if you have the opportunity, gives them a chance to do a little homework. And it's not something that you need to get dragged out of you unless you're afraid or don't have any reliable references. And that's a red flag that will certainly come up in time. I think the key, just like on LinkedIn and live streaming, is being authentic. Don't try to be somebody you're not. People can see through that. They've been experienced with that. Doesn't mean you got to be overly modest, but it should be that, hey, you're just a regular person trying to do a good job of what you do, and you're committed. And I think commitment goes a long way. There's a lot of people who are great when things are in certain good situations, but when the rain comes, they run for the cover as opposed to standing out there and hanging in there. And I think people read you beyond the words that you say. How you say them, how you treat people around the table, being respectful, honoring other people goes a long way. And treating people like you want to be treated will make a difference too. So I think there's so much to relevance because it's actually correlated with relatability. A person is relevant, but can I relate to them? And are they relatable to other people? And that's why having other people who may have traits or qualities you don't to complement you. If you have a team, let's say you got a great person in technology. Well, that kind of offsets maybe where you might be a little rough. Or if you're just a great person, organizational leader, things of that nature, they want you to keep focused on core competency. They don't want you to keep changing hats every day in different ways. Plus, it also addresses that hit by a bus question that seems to always come up is we've got a strong team with me, but just as strong without me, which means that if you want to take a week vacation, it's not going to be the end of the world for the company. And also how you delegate, how you hire, who you hire, because that's a reflection of judgment. Like, how did you hire this guy or gal? What were you thinking? And that could be good or bad. And naturally, you want it to be as good as possible. And the other thing I always say is buy some vowels before you solve the puzzle. Ask more questions. Sometimes answer a question with a question. You can't do that as a regular way of doing things because you'll never get an answer out there. All you'll get is more specific with the question, but it lends itself to, if you don't understand, say, I don't quite understand what you're saying. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this point before I answer it? Because you might be under the wrong assumption. Clarity goes a long way. Deflecting just extends conversations, and other things are supposed to be known, right? You can't have people explain every little detail, but again, if you're caught up in something, just to be sure. Sometimes you ever see those spelling bees, and they got these young kids who win these championships with these words. They'll say, can you share that again with me? Right? Can you pronounce that for me before you do that? It's not to make it easier, it's to make it practical. And you don't want to leave a contest saying, I didn't really understand what they were saying, but I kept going with the conversation. When you're confused, it may not be easy to say, but it's important to say those things. So, Karl, why did you choose funding? When did it become relevant that you decided, hey, this is an industry or direction I really want to pursue?
I tell the story that I've always been good with numbers. I think all the way back even to high school, I was somehow always the treasurer of the organization. I could balance a checkbook. I understood where the numbers came from. And as I moved into doing business and working with businesses, every time you get a new business started, it's always going to be short of funding, with rare exception, which never seems to be my draw. But I would joke that I always got the short straw. I would end up being the person who had to figure out where the money was going to come from in order to get the new business off the ground. And as I continued to work on it, I realized that this was like the one item, the one action that was always in demand, always needed, always missing. Whereas if I were to pick some other skill set or some other vocation, there seemed to be lots and lots of people who could do that and do it well, and often better than me. So if I were going to be contributing to an innovation, to a new business, the ability to raise funding was a skill I could pretty much lean on, would always be needed, it would never go away. It wasn't a temporary fad or market window that might disappear on me. I can tell people I raise funding in almost any conversation and I will gain immediate interest. So I guess it was a little bit to build up my ego and also to create some ability to sustain myself as an individual and in my career. It's interesting you're talking about stuff for reasons, not recognizing the word today was relevance. My two postings over the weekend on my newsletter on Saturday and Sunday dealt with trying to both define the entrepreneur using keywords and then turn around and trying to do the same thing with the investor candidates so that we could do a more automated form of matching. A lot of people know today, and this was driven out of it, a couple of activities last week where somebody says, we have this wild and crazy project. Karl, are you qualified to be on the team? And would you provide us with enough background information so that we can make a better evaluation? So I had to create like a hyper special vitae on a particular project that nobody's ever done before. So I have this suite of keywords that I use to try to describe myself, which is kind of like a big net that I cast and say, yeah, I can do all these things well enough that I could fill this position on a team, not knowing what the team's going to look like when we're all done. It's interesting in that because, Don, we've talked in the past about building trust, demonstrating integrity, because in any relationship, those are common keys that everybody looks for. So I was going back and forth through my keywords and I was testing them for trustworthiness or confidence and capability. I think were the words I was looking for, trust and capability. And it was interesting to see how broadly I wanted to define myself because I was trying to make myself look good. But when I turned around and I started talking about looking for an investor candidate or a funding source, I go to the other extreme. I want one word that tells me I'm in the right place at the right time with the right person who's got the money, who's willing to do something. Because too often, as I said earlier, we cast our nets too broadly. Entrepreneurs talk to too many people who never invest. And that's inefficient and a waste of their time, and they don't have time to waste. So this interesting use of keywords to define myself, to help make myself relevant to the person who's looking. Well, if I'm doing the searching, I want to go to the other extreme, and I want a very, very narrow target, or I called it the center of the bullseye. I'm trying to find one key thing I can look for that says this is the right person to talk to, because everybody else, I could talk to them as well, but they're less likely to provide the funding because it's a lesser match, and I have higher competition for that funding because a lot of other people have the same capabilities. So all kind of an interesting exercise in continuing to refine how I go about raising funding.
Yeah, that's great. And it brings to mind not only doing independent study, but competitive study in a positive way. So in other words, who's doing what you're doing or even doing it better and bigger? And again, LinkedIn, if you look at their profile, will share all their posts with you, all their newsletters with you. So if they're a little bit higher on the totem pole and making bigger strides and inroads, what is their process? How do they go out with their messaging? Because LinkedIn allows you, again, with 1 billion registered subscribers, or however you want to call them, a great pool to fish in. And it's a matter of really, again, being relevant, is that not everybody who fogs a mirror is going to be your ideal candidate. You know, you want to go where everybody else goes that wants to meet or achieve some level of relationship. And, you know, I was just listening to a Simon Sinek book, I guess, if that's how you say his name. And in the book, he was mentioning that for a long time in his career, there happened to be one person who he always felt competitive with. And, you know, he would look at their book sales and then compare it against his book sales, look at this and for some reason he couldn't help himself. He always felt bad when he did that, when he compared. And what happened is that for so long they would always be at the same conferences, but speaking on different days. So they would never have that direct interaction. So one time they were both scheduled to speak at the same event at the same time in a panel or whatever it was. And that's where he got to know, or they got to know each other better. And then they started to cooperate and they shared a stage. And after a while, it went from where they were to promoting each other, right? So when he did his book, he would say, and by the way, Charles, whatever, had just done his book and I recommend it. And it changed the whole dynamic of everything. Because, you know, everybody's got their own road, everybody has their own way. And to respect and honor those people brings back the respect and honor to yourself. And that relates to Bob Berg with the Go Giver book. The people who give the most get the most. Now, it may not be at the same time frame. It may not be in the same manner that it comes back, but it does work. And, you know, just to say hello to somebody without bringing value, because you knock on somebody's door, they open it up. And most of the time, however they say it, what do you want? Who are you? Right? If you've already given in advance and you continue to support people without even their knowledge, you know, I'm just promoted Simon just now. Maybe he's listening. Maybe one of his readers is listening. Maybe I'm taking advantage of his quality name and reputation by saying I read his book and I liked it. But that will relate to people who read his books and liked it or went to his speeches, because we're one of the same in that regard. And you want to make yourself familiar in a safe way, in a quality way. You've kind of actually qualified yourself, you know, by, it brings to mind a saying, and I don't know how true it is today, but in the past it was, if you want to know who somebody is, ask them what they're reading. Not that many people read as much. Maybe now it's what podcaster you're listening to or live streams, but that'll tell you what your focus is. And those are good questions, because I think a lot of times people ask specific questions to specific areas, and sometimes they're better off asking general questions. You know, I mean, have you ever coached Little League, or have you ever done these things? You know, what have you done for the community that you're in? You know, where did you graduate from and how did you do in school? So it's a mixture where it's not, okay, define this number in 3 different ways. And being involved in a open-ended, spontaneous conversation helps, because, you know, a lot of people will give you what they want you to focus on, you know, and whoever presents the first offer or a plan, you're usually working from that or away from it. You know, if you can almost have a meeting of the minds in advance to say, before you prepare a lot, here's what we're looking to see, would help somebody. Because it's too late when they're showing up in a boardroom and you say, that's totally not what we're looking for. We're looking for this. Well, how was I to know that? and why weren't you more helpful? And now it's too late, or you're having to explain. And anytime you got to explain, it's not good. What I found about my experiences is not as significant as Carl's, is that you want to get into the questions sooner than later. You don't want to have a 45-minute time frame and you just finished your presentation. At that point, it doesn't matter. I mean, hopefully it landed on ears that were listening, but it also says you didn't give us a chance, right? If everybody gets one opportunity and switches to the other person, well, that's fair. But if someone just plugs you with all this information and stuff like that, and sometimes you wonder, is this a distraction? Is this an intentional, take all the oxygen out of the room and don't give us an opportunity? And then some people do the other thing and they come with very little, and after 5 minutes, it's like, well, what do we got to work with here? And did you really care enough to put anything together that was relevant to the group? And the other thing is, failure is feedback, and sometimes you got to get a couple no's to figure out where the yeses are. So it's lovely when you can present one time to one group and they say yes, and we'll honor all of your requests, versus leaving there. And I always would leave and say, was there anything that stuck out, after you got to know, and to help me understand and maybe better prepare. And most of the people, if you're sincere and open-minded, they'll share with you. And it may not be you. It may be like, hey, just by the way, we just decided on 2 other deals yesterday. And now we're not as needy of that opportunity, but in 3 months or 6 months, things may change. And I think that's the reason why you want to get more relationship oriented, not transactional. Plus, if you don't want to be in a situation of having a tin cup and begging out there, in 3 weeks, if I don't get the money, I'm going to have to turn the lights off. Or it doesn't matter to me if I get the money, I don't care. That's not always a great selling point. So really understanding what you're saying, what does it really mean to the people who are in the room with you? And you can gauge a lot of that just by their interest, right? If they start fumbling around, looking the other way, that, you're talking to an empty room in some sense. How do you keep it lively? How do you keep it interesting? And how do you continue to respect people without saying, hey, what are you looking at your phone for? Or, I'm doing something important here. Well, that's too late for that, because it just reinforces maybe it isn't as important as you think. And then having other people with you helps, because I learned that when you're saying things, other people are observing, other people are taking notes. You might have missed a good point and they want to come back to it and reinforce it. And that's why having something that's a little bit more measured, a little bit more organized, a little bit more synchronized. You should know how much time you're using in your presentation, and a little bit of practice doesn't hurt without getting too rehearsed. If 15, 20 minutes is plenty in a 45-minute meeting, to allow 25 minutes worth of that, because also it may not end either way on the first meeting. It may be, okay, we need more of this, and you could request more of that. And, asking a simple question like, what would it take, for this to make it happen, and you could tell how far away or how close you are and how they want to chip in, because when people get excited about something, they want to stay excited. They want to build on that excitement for you and for them. So, Karl, how are you with taking the pulse of who you're with and making those proper, rightful adjustments?
Well, I pretty much enter into almost any conversation or presentation with the assumption that I'm there because I'm an expert on the topic of funding. And I don't assume that the person I'm talking to may even understand their need or how they may solve it. and we may be drilling down for a while before we get to where we want to be in the conversation. But it's not uncommon for me for somebody to get on the phone who says, "Hey, I was told to give you a call," and I go, "My first question is, how can I be of help?" We're going to jump immediately into the questioning. Or if I'm doing a presentation to a mixed audience, where there could be 20 different agendas or more of people, in the audience who they're seeking information. That's why they're there. They want to get something from the presentation. I may start off with the person on the front row and go, "Why are you here? What information did you want to get out of today's presentation?" And if they ask a question that sounds rational, legitimate, kind of middle of the road, I can then go to the rest of the audience. I go, "Okay, everybody put your hand in the air who would like this same kind of information." If so, then that may be all I'm going to talk about for the remainder of the presentation. If it's a one-on-one conversation, we're going to drill down where I may ask 3, 4, 5, 10 questions to get to the heart of what I think the issue is, which may be that they need help doing something. It may or may not be anything I can do. If it isn't anything I can do, then I can refer them to someone else, and we can both move on with an efficient use of both of our time. If it turns out that we have something in common, such as a hobby or some activity, yeah, we may take a little detour, have a social chat, and enjoy that before getting back to business on asking those questions. But I find that if I'm pitching, I should already, I'm already in a second, third level. Typically, when I talk about raising funding, it's a 4 or 5 step staged process, where the first is I make them aware. The second is, are you interested? Then here's some information. Does that look like that's a match? And if it looks like there is a reason to go forward, then what information do they need? I try to anticipate that. That's all your offering documents, promotion materials, slide decks, and so forth. And then it's a Q&A thing. Well, what did I not tell you you need to know? How can I boost your trust in me, confidence I can do what needs to be done? Do you need to see a demonstration? Do you need an example or case study? You need a reference or testimonial? We try to get them up to a level where they feel comfortable. They have all the knowledge they need in making a decision if they're going to engage me or not. And then we get down to the deal, which is how much work do you need? How much can you afford to pay? How do we structure something that works for both of us? But that may take 3, 4, 5 meetings. It's rare to do it in 3. 4 is common, 5 is more often. There is no instantaneous transaction where we show up in the middle of a plaza on TV and we hug and I get a check, walk away. It just doesn't work that way. That's TV. That's entertainment. It's not reality. So I like to get to the heart of why we're having the conversation early. Partly because I know a lot of times it's either outside my field or it may be someone who can do a far better job than me, and I'd like to get them talking to that person rather than me. Other than to make sure that if I do the introduction, it's going to work well for everybody.
Yeah, very good points. And what I see there is, again, coming back to staging. There might be some preliminary information you need to send to get people conversational, maybe get a little input from that. Then when you present, it's enough that it covers all the bases without going too deep. And then being able to turn it back to say, well, what piqued your interest the most? Or what area do you want to really explore with the time we have? And what also comes to mind, in the past, before Zoom, before live streaming, there was physical visiting. And, there was a group out in actually Boston, Highland Capital, which was a very significant group. And the chairman of that company was the former chairman of Staples, which was 25, 30 years ago, or even less significant. Well, I go out to Boston, which is a flight, which is a hotel, which is everything. Do my presentation. 2 months. Well, we'd like to have you come back and do it again. Well, it's another trip to Boston. and another flight. And that was fine. And that's why I tried to group it like Boston, New York, Washington, or something, and have 3 or 4 things set up that while I was gone, I could getting more involved in different situations. But now with Zoom, with live streaming, you could bring that step into it. So the head person at that's, you could say, I've got a show that relates to what we're talking about. Love to have you on the show. Or, hey, can we do a Zoom meeting with everybody around the table? And that way you can get more done in less time, less expense, and less inconvenience for everybody, which it was not the element before. It was really, hey, he doesn't want to fly out to see us. Well, forget that deal. We're not going to fly out to see him, or we're not going to do it on the telephone. It's a different world, and people who can embrace live streaming, who can embrace newsletters, because these people are always looking to enhance their knowledge base. They're always looking to build more relationships. They're not an island onto themselves. Where do you meet them? How do you relate to them? Which could be, you're always better off being invited to something than trying to get an invitation to something. When someone says, oh, this, and this, we'd love to have you come out. And actually, that's where industry events make so much difference. Pacific Crest used to take over Vail 1 week in the summer every year. I'm talking about take it over. I mean, they stayed at that hotel that I could never pronounce very well. And that was the center of the influence they had, but every other hotel. And, the beauty of it is you'd see the same people every year. And you'd meet somebody this year and get to talk to them a little bit more next year, or get to meet them on a personal level and have some emails going back and forth. Well, and that has been so important in my success in the past, is being recognized. There was this one group, and it was, it was the Net Leaders group that was always in John Malone's headquarters, which was just perfect because he had every time he had a beautiful kitchen or grill, and they always had these delicious lamb chops. So half of the time it was just getting those lamb chops, but I got to meet the people who started Wayfair, the people who started Zillow, because at a certain point they were just launching or starting out, and you got to meet them at that level. And then Pacific Crest had their thing. And what's nice is if you can do it in your own backyard. To me, to drive to Vail was an hour and a half, and people were flying in from all over the world. And it was different. It was different because I had conversations where someone just bought their bigger boat, traded in their new airplane. You'd see the cars there. You think you were in Beverly Hills, the exotic cars that would show up. And it did open your eyes to a much bigger world. And I learned so much just by being around people that in itself justified being there. And actually in most conferences, especially peer-to-peer, they don't want you selling anyways. People there to learn, to grow. It's not a place to pitch your thing. It's a place to build relationships that after the conference you may be pitching. So you do have that expansive look. One last thing, I was at this one group, and it was in New York, and it was all the leaders in the home center, home industry. And you're talking head of Lowe's, head of Home Depot, head of everybody. And they would say, hey, not with any disrespect, I know why I'm here. What are you here for? You've got 9 stores. And I always had an answer because I got the question so many times. And I would always say, well, 2 things. They find me to be a great conversationalist, and I keep things moving around here. The other thing, I'm so small, I'm the only person you could talk to and trust here because there's nothing I can do to hurt you, right? And it opened up the conversation. That's how I met my partner. So you never know what you don't know. It looks like we're at top of the hour. I love this conversation. Me and Karl continue to grow together. from every conversation on the show and off the show. And I think that's a great trend that someone can follow for themselves. So, Karl, final thoughts and words?
Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned Vail because I'm in Beaver Creek at the moment, Avon, Colorado, for the State Economic Development Conference, where one of the labels I wear is a private economic developer because I work with communities to get a group of businesses moving forward at the same time. And I am here to say hello, to renew relationships, to create new relationships, and keep my ear, so to speak, to the ground on what are the current problems that a lot of these people are facing who are typically my allies, my partners on specific projects. And so the better I understand where they're coming from and what they're facing, it's easier for me to either partner with them or maybe come up with a solution for a new type of funding, like the new community investment fund project I'm working on now. So all good. So as soon as we get done here, I'll turn off all the lights and jump over to the conference. And while I'm still working on stuff as we go forward. But yeah, Donna, I really enjoy being on your show. I enjoy our conversations, and I think we're making progress individually and together on understanding how to use tools like LinkedIn to share what we know and also to build relationships everywhere in the world. So it's all good.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And actually, I remember the hotel name was the Sonolab.
Oh yeah.
I can never get that right, but I did remember it. And I agree with Karl. You build on quality, you build on strength, and you build on collaboration and cooperation. And that's a much better building block than other elements that you could use. So, with that, I'll get Karl on his way to his conference. I'll get everybody on their way to the rest of their day. Want to thank everybody so much. It was a great crowd today, great subject, and more importantly, a great co host. So with that, see you tomorrow.